It's so nice to see you. Thank you for making time to chat today. And
Of course. Thanks for having me.
for our listeners, Dorie has been showing up in my Substack for a while as a questioner. So we've been in this conversation about love publicly in the Substack, and then certainly just in our own friendship and relationship. And now we can dive a little deeper into this question of what is love, what helps it to flow, what gets in the way. And one of the things I don't know if you have a thought of where to start, but one of the things you shared with me that I don't think ever got in the Substack was this image of love as like the stuff in the mosaic in between all the broken pieces. Remember that conversation that we had? Which I just love that image of all of our hard edges finding a way to connect. So I share that as a beautiful image of love. I think of love as that when I feel love deeply, I feel connected. I feel connected to everything, really, and in the best of times. What's your experience, or what's helped you to feel like your little shard of glass is connected to other shards of glass?
Yeah.
Want to share anything about your growing up or what you're experiencing now?
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, for me, it really became about moving away from the idea that love is a puzzle piece, and your pieces perfectly match up with other people's pieces, and it all fits together in this really rigid and intense way. Because that's so isolating. And doesn't leave open a lot of opportunity for people to connect with one another in spite of their very marked differences, right?
Right. And we are kind of sold that, aren't we? We're sold that story that love, the romantic movies, and you found your perfect person, and we're all I
mean, like and that it's not just romantic movies, right? Like it's in Disney, it's in these children's stories that we are inundated with from really young ages, right? Saying that there's this one perfect person for you, or like there's this one true friend for you, and that puts so much pressure on people, on us, on the people we interact with, and it just, and no one person can be everything to all people all the time. Like there's just no way. That's not the reality of the human experience. And so I think if we actually want to take that seriously and cultivate relationships that are loving and life-giving and allow all of us to flourish as we are, we need to get clear about what exactly we are and own the fact that, like, my shard of glass, maybe my shard of glass has a particularly sharp edge here, but it's a little smooth over here, and yours might be totally different. But that doesn't mean we can't connect. That doesn't mean we can't do the work together and come together to make this to be a part of the big mosaic of life.
Yeah. How do you feel like there was a transition in your life where you realized, oh, maybe life isn't a Disney movie? Or like, what helped you to shift your perspective? Or have you always known yourself to be a shard of glass?
I've known myself to be a pretty distinctive person. I've always felt pretty different from the people in my life. Just the way I looked at the world, the way that I encountered situations. And that's not to say like, oh, I am the specialist of all the snowflakes, right? Like I just the stuff that makes me Dorie, my behaviors, my mannerisms, the things that the way that I see the world, the way that I engage with the world um it's not all that special, right? But it comes together in a particular way for me. And in that particularity, I was pretty different from my family, from my friends, you know. And so, and like that's just been something that I've been cognizant of since I was very, very young. Um
And accepting of it? Because I wonder, I just, in my own
eh,
experience, a little, yeah, I've been reflecting more and more in my childhood and becoming aware that I think I also had a sense of being different, and that I had a sense of watching those people who were the same get certain things and being
mhm.
like, oh, so I guess if I want those things, I have to be like that. And I can even remember those thought processes as like a
Oh yeah.
11-year-old. I don't know that I was very successful at trying to be like these other people, but I set out to on some way. Did you try to set out to conform at all, or
To
what was
some degree,
yeah.
I mean, like I did what I could, and you know, I mean, and to this day, like we all have these learned behaviors that make it possible for us to function in society, right? And a lot of that it's like a light switch. Like I can turn it on, I can turn it off.
Yeah.
Um, but for me at least, like just the way that my life has shaped up and um come together, like there was a lot that I just couldn't really conform to. Like
Mhm.
I tried, but like I can't, you know, like it just wasn't possible.
Mhm.
Um, you know, and it's not a bad thing to want to conform in and of itself
Yeah.
because, you know, I mean we do need to have some level of understanding one another in order to interact with each other, right?
Yes.
Um
Yes.
and you know, like there were definitely times like growing up from really young ages like, oh, like I'm not supposed to do this or I'm not supposed to be this way or like when I was 4 years old we had a birthday party and like I guess like my friends from my preschool class were invited
Mhm.
and like all the moms of the boys got me Barbies, right?
Sure.
And like cuz that's what you do
Right.
for for little girls of that age in the early 90s.
Right.
And I hated Barbies. I hated Barbies with a fiery burning passion. I did not understand them. I did not like them. I didn't want to play with them. And I couldn't even really tell you why at that age. It just
Wasn't your thing.
I was not a Barbie girl. Not
Mhm.
a Barbie girl. And after the party and everything, I asked my mom like, why did they get me these Barbies? Like,
Yeah.
don't they know I don't like them? Like, really? Like, why are they doing this? Why would you do this?
Mhm.
And you know, my mom was like, "It's okay, Dory. We can give them to your sister. It'll be fine." Blah blah blah. You know, and you know, but it just really, yeah, just navigating these parts of myself that like like I wasn't gonna pretend to like Barbies
Mhm.
um when I just did not see the point.
Mhm.
And like to be fair, like nothing against Barbies.
Yeah.
If you like them, more power to you. We love the Barbie girls and
Mhm.
all
Mhm.
that great stuff. My sister was loved all of that stuff growing up. She's very much in that space.
Yeah.
And that's awesome.
Yeah.
But for me, it was just sort of like I don't understand this and therefore I will not comply with this.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, and I love that you had that much deep knowing as a 4-year-old of what you liked and what you didn't like. I don't even
Oh,
know.
I put my parents through their paces in a lot of ways. I think it's fair to say.
Mhm. Mhm. So how can you think of times or people or situations where you in your formation felt like real belonging or true belonging? Like what does true belonging feel like for you?
Yeah, true belonging. That
Mm.
is.
Maybe true is too heavy to make it
No,
sound
I
true.
mean, just no. I don't think it's heavy. It's just I
Okay.
don't know that I've ever fully felt that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
for me, it's not about belonging. It's about being okay with myself in not belonging, you
Oh,
know?
interesting.
Like being in the world, but not of the world, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, that's not a great example, but,
Mm-hmm.
um, I mean, in some ways, for me, I really have wanted to find these spaces where where I feel fully empowered and embraced in who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And in a lot of ways, that on a deep level, that doesn't necessarily happen, because insofar as I'm a human being in particular relationship with other people, I'm always going to be fulfilling aspects of that relationship to other people, like,
Mm-hmm.
and so the fullness of me
Mm-hmm.
is not necessarily going to be recognized in these spaces. Like, and being okay with that
Mm-hmm.
and knowing that, like, you know, the people at St. John's are not going to necessarily see me as a scholar or a daughter or um, or a sister or a person that plays Dungeons and Dragons, like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and that's okay. They
Mm-hmm.
don't, you know, and like, and that's true of every relationship we have with one another, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Interesting. So the idea that your beingness has so many different levels and facets that you can know and hold and
yeah,
feel a sense of connection to, and yet when you enter relationship with other people, your sense is that only part of who you are is represented in that relationship. So
I
is
don't
that
know that
what
it
you're trying to say?
necessarily. Yeah, I don't know that it's necessarily part of who I am.
Mm-hmm.
They only get to see part of who I am because,
Mm-hmm.
like, different relationships with different people, they get to see multiple aspects of who I am.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
my relationship with my fiance, he gets to see me as a Dungeons and Dragons player, and
Yeah.
as a priest, and as a partner, and
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
all of these things.
Uh-huh.
Um, it's just knowing that there's always going to be that aspect of you that people do not perceive,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Like there's always going to be that bit of yourself
Mm-hmm.
that other people don't see.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's okay.
That's part of the shard
That's
reality, that we're not
Yeah,
puzzle pieces. So
we're not puzzle pieces,
mhm.
and there's always going to be aspects that we're not
Mhm.
getting with
Right.
with one another. There's
Yeah.
always, whether that's just like the mundane, like, oh, I didn't realize you were annoyed by the fact that I didn't do laundry yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
to the deeper realities of like, oh, I did not realize that, you know, by that giving you a Barbie, Dory, makes you feel like you
Right.
are essentialized and not cared for and not loved in who
Mm-hmm.
you are.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, like
Mm.
there's always going to be stuff that we miss.
Yeah.
Um, and being okay with that and
Yeah.
doing the work to try to not miss it in the future, but to always like be in communication and kind of know that, like, hold space for the fact that we're human and we're going to
There's gonna
screw it
be,
up,
we're gonna
right?
right. We're
We're
human and
going
we're
to.
gonna screw it up. That might be the tagline for this this interview.
Yes.
I like that. And I wonder, it's making me wonder if there's a what's the range. Okay, we all screw it up, and
Yeah.
we need to give each other grace to screw it up, or that
Yes.
we won't see each other. And certainly in the planet right now, there's a
Hmm.
extreme level of that, of like, I don't know you, and I kind of refuse to know you, or I refuse to accept these aspects of you. And um I guess from my experience of belonging, I don't, listening to you describe it, I'm like, I think I share that. I don't know that I've ever been with anybody who knows, even my husband, he doesn't know everything about me. You know, only I and God know everything about me.
Yeah,
Um,
and we ourselves don't know everything about
true,
ourselves too.
exactly.
Like
And I'm only
that's
just
that's the
learning
thing.
every day. Yeah.
Yeah, so like we're always
All
coming.
right.
We're
God knows
always
everything about me.
yes.
I'm coming to learn.
We're getting there. We're
We're,
getting there.
we're getting there. So accepting the distances that always exist between people does seem really important for love, you know, to
Yes.
have that humility. And I do recognize that I feel more belonging when the people that I'm with are willing to hear more about who I am, or are curious, or have like an attitude of welcome instead of an attitude
Yes.
of like suspicion and judgment. And I wonder what that, maybe you don't have an example of a community or a place where you felt true belonging or full total belonging, but have there been spaces that have given you that experience of welcome and
Absolutely.
curiosity?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean like and like let me say like I just think like ideologically speaking, that level of true belonging where all of me is fully welcome all the time, like
Yeah.
just that just does not exist in
Yeah.
real life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's not to say that the communities that I surround myself with have not been incredibly welcoming, wonderful communities.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just making the sort of more abstract point that like,
Yeah.
you know, we're doing the best we can with what we have, and
Yeah.
we will fall short.
Yes.
We just will.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
I like to believe it's like
yeah,
a tangent curve. We can't ever
yeah,
get to it, but we can get closer. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yes. And so communities that I have felt welcome in at their best, I mean, St. John's is definitely one of them. Like
Mm-hmm.
I have felt such a care and just a care and an acceptance and a safety there that you know like I don't know that other uh I don't know that other parishes would be quite that kind to brand new clergy who are learning how to do it all, you know.
I wonder if you can identify what it is about St. John's. Do you have a sense of,
Mm,
I know a lot of this is
yeah.
unknowable, but
I would say that like I want to be careful about my words here
sure.
because there's a lot of discourse around the intent versus impact
Mm-hmm.
debate,
Sure.
and like I definitely hold that impact matters way more than intent, but
Mm-hmm.
that does not I do not believe that means we throw intention out the window, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that what makes St. John's so distinctive is that the people that I have encountered and create community with there are deeply rooted in this intention of welcoming people, loving people, and knowing that that's the place that's the place where things really matter.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I preach a sermon too long, I don't think I do that, but you know, if I go too long in a sermon, or I accidentally drop something, or one time I knocked over one of the cameras, you know, just I'm a klutz, it's what I do. Um like it's okay.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you know, and by removing that by removing that fear, because people aren't rooted in fear when they come there. People are rooted in love and
Mm-hmm.
care and um, welcome toward one another.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because if they were rooted in fear, they'd be like, well, "Who is this person? Who is this new person? What are they doing? Why aren't they,
Right.
doing XYZ things.
Yeah.
Removing that gives me the space and knowledge
Mhm.
to rest and say, okay, this is a safe space. This is a place where I can bring
Mm.
myself. And so, like, I've been able to say, hey, I'm a PhD candidate, and this is part of what I'm studying, and this is how it affects our readings today.
Mhm.
Um, I've been able to say, hey, this is who I am as a person, and I can share this bit of myself with you.
Mhm. Yeah. And there's a little I do love it feels like St. John's pulls off all of the pomp and circumstance and beauty of the liturgy without it being with grace. So there's
Yeah.
space to knock over a camera or two, or
Yes.
to forget that the prayer is here, because I do perceive that there's this
Yeah.
rootedness in love and not fear. And okay, I kind of want to go there. What
Yeah.
do you think helps a community be rooted in love and not fear?
I mean, I think it gets very, I think it's hard to do, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like, St. John's is one of many communities that is
Yeah.
doing this well,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
Um, but I think in my experience, which is limited,
Of course.
you know, I think that getting very clear about what you're doing and why you're doing it
Mhm.
matters. Like,
Mhm.
the liturgy is important. Do not get me wrong, the liturgy is deeply important, and it's there for a reason,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm. Yeah.
But the liturgy is not the the end goal, right?
Right. Mhm.
The
And
end
it's
goal is connecting to God and establishing the kingdom of God on earth,
Mhm.
right? It is about following in the way of love of Jesus,
Mhm.
and in this particular way that we've been given.
Yeah.
It's about, you know, coming together and being there for one another,
Mhm.
loving each other and loving God,
Yeah.
and treating the liturgy as an idol
Right.
gets away from that.
Mhm. Mhm.
And,
Yeah.
like, it's never like, don't get me wrong, it's not good to screw up the liturgy. Like,
You don't aim to.
I don't aim to. I don't yeah, like, I don't
Mhm.
want to do that, because it is a tool
Yeah.
that helps us connect to that
Mhm.
ultimate reality
Mhm.
of
Mhm.
love.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you been a part of communities, and you don't have to name names or anything, but maybe your experience that you felt were more rooted in fear than love?
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
And
Definitely.
what's the sense of that, or what?
Yeah, just you know, if it's rooted in fear and rooted if you're rooted in fear and rooted in suspicion,
Mhm.
um and judgment, and this is the correct way to do things, and this is not the correct way to do things, and this
Yeah.
is the correct way to be, and this is not the correct way to be.
Mhm.
Um like, it
Yeah.
all it does is spread more suspicion, more anxiety, more fear,
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
and doesn't really um create spaces for people to be honest about who they are. It doesn't create spaces for people to actually connect with one another, because they're so busy making sure that they appear the right way
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
do the right things and
Mhm.
stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um,
Thinking of your mosaic model, it makes me feel
yeah,
like a community rooted in fear. Everybody has to be not only a puzzle piece, but like a certain shape puzzle piece, because there's none of that grace to help us fit together.
yes,
And so it only works. And I think perhaps
yeah,
for those who it's working for, it is comfortable. It does feel good to sort of know what to do if whatever
absolutely.
that
I
is.
love a good rule. I love rules and tasks and clear directions. It's
Yeah.
great,
Yeah.
but it's only great because it gives me a set of it gives me information that I need to know so that I can bring my loving self into a space that allows you to connect with it, right?
Yeah.
Like, the rules themselves are not they're not the end goal here.
Mm-hmm. Well,
And
I always think,
so often we treat the rules and directions and stuff as the end goal.
yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, and I think about how it's like it works when it's working, but then as soon as somebody comes in who's a triangle and not a square,
Yes.
there's not, or if you're thinking you're a square and then all of a sudden you become a triangle, you're like, well, I don't fit here anymore. And I
Yeah.
think that's definitely one of the things that I sit with a lot with the project of church as a space to be following this path of love, is like how to have rules and roles and liturgies
Yeah.
and structures that are life-giving, but also have this element of grace, because it's so heartbreaking for people who feel connected to God through a certain structure and then all of a
Yeah.
sudden don't fit in that structure. And not only are they losing the community of the church, but they're losing potentially their understanding of their relationship to God. And it does feel like you Episcopalians hold this pretty well. You have a structure that is fluid, that has made room for women clergy and LGBTQ clergy, and all of
Yeah,
these.
but
Really,
that structure didn't always exist, right?
yeah,
Like, those are like, this is the 50th year, or
yeah.
the 50th anniversary of women clergy in the
Hmm.
Episcopal Church.
Hmm.
Like, it's only 50 years. Like, this is not like
Yeah,
it's not this was not this wasn't even a lifetime ago.
right.
Um
So it's
and
not.
it's been so yeah, and it's been a way shorter time span for LGBTQ clergy.
Yeah, yeah,
Um
yeah.
and
It's been a wrestle.
yeah, like,
And that's just it. It's not that you had the perfect structure that was
no.
perfectly able to accommodate everyone. It's that the structure itself gave way, and perhaps because of your insight that there was a grounding in love with this community and a willingness and a
Yeah,
willingness to.
and there was also individual people that, took that step,
Yeah,
right? Like,
yeah,
the structure didn't change itself. It didn't give way by itself. People changed the structure.
yeah.
And people changed the structure because they questioned the structure, because they were behaving it because they wanted to act in ways that were rooted in love. But the thing is, the people that were upholding the structure also believed that they were rooted in love.
Yeah,
And in fact, they kind of were in some ways.
yeah,
And, it forced the question, and, we made it out the other side, and it was still really difficult.
mhm,
And, you know, we need to get better at holding that. If we as Christians and people in general want to actually create these spaces where people of all the different shapes of the mosaic can come in
yeah.
and build the artwork.
Yeah. That's what I'm interested in. It seems like that's how do we get better at being in that middle, in the in between place. I definitely feel a lot of drive to that question, because it's like it's good to recognize we are all different and we can never try to fully know each other.
Yeah.
And how do we live side by side, and how do we live side by side when there's conflict and when there's disagreement? And I as a non-Episcopalian, not really know much. I'm like, you guys are doing great. Obviously people in the middle, it was hard and people worked really hard and it was
Yeah, and
painful and probably there was hurt.
yeah, and
What
there's still stuff,
and
right?
still
Like,
stuff.
we're not done.
Yes,
Like,
there's still more
we're
work to do.
there's still so
Yeah.
much work to do. Like, and that's the thing. We're never going to be done.
Yes. It's not about being done. Well, and that, to
No.
me, that's creation, right? I mean, how as we evolve and there's more differences, there's more creative tensions to navigate. I like to
Yeah.
call conflicts creative tensions. What have you learned to navigate those creative tensions, Dorie? What is
Yeah. So,
what can you bring to that conversation?
right. And I am no expert at this. I do some of it really well
Mm-hmm.
most of the time, and some of it I do really badly at.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but for me, I found that getting very clear on my own values and my own sense of self, what matters to me and what my non-negotiable needs are, is absolutely essential. Um, like when you're encountering somebody that maybe doesn't agree with you or anything like that, like you need to know what your own triggers are. You need to know where your boundaries are. And that doesn't mean they have to stay static forever. Like you can renegotiate them, um you can reassess them, etc. But like you need to know where you are, where you're rooted, um get clear on your own location before you even begin thinking about encountering other people,
Oh,
right?
it's such an important point. You have to
Yeah.
kind of know what your mosaic piece is and where your sharp edges are and
Yes.
where your smoother edges are. And
Yeah. And
what
that's
I was
hard.
going to say,
And
what
it's
has
a
helped you?
constant, it is a constant sort of
Yeah.
um self-reflective
Yeah.
exercise,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And guess what? You're still human, so you're going to screw it up.
Yes. And it's never over, it's never
Yep,
ended.
never over, never ending.
But a willingness to take responsibility.
Yeah.
And I think this is one thing that's become very big in my mind is like, okay, I might not know myself completely, but I do
Mhm.
know what it feels like to be me better than anybody else. So I have to
Yes.
take some responsibility for knowing what I
Yes.
need, which I
Yeah.
really think is kind of a new concept. I don't know. It feels like a lot of I don't know. There's been a history of like, here's the things you need, and here's the food triangle, and here's the
Mhm.
like feeling like other people know. I certainly know I went through a lot of life feeling like other people knew better than I did about what I needed. And it's only been recently that I've been more, oh, like I actually have some responsibility to like, do I need rest? Do I need, to really think about
Mm.
my own heart? I'd feel like it hasn't been necessarily encouraged enough.
Yeah.
What's helped you to get more grounded in your own kind of sense of yourself and your sense of boundaries, and what's that journey been like for you?
Yeah. It's it's a lot of trial and error,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
Um and it's about being honest about
yeah.
where things went awry
Hmm.
and being willing to own my own part in that.
Yeah.
And and I hope that I've gotten better at it as I've gotten older,
Hmm.
and as I've grown and matured and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, it's interesting that you say that like in your experience, other people seemed to be seem to know more about you and stuff like that. Whereas for me, it was slightly different. Like I didn't believe that people knew better than me, or knew what was best for me better than I did, as much as it was like, oh, what do I need?
Hmm. Hmm.
Like that was the new piece, and like, and like get like actually like feel it like getting to a point where I was comfortable enough to admit like, oh, I do have needs.
Yeah.
I have needs. I'm allowed to say that. What? Um, yeah,
Uh-huh.
I mean, I think, and that's like part of like
Yeah.
that's a huge uh piece of like gender socialization, general society, how society deals with younger people, and stuff like that. Really, navigating that and realizing like, oh, I'm a human being and it's okay to need what I need. And giving myself the space to figure out what it is I need.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like, I don't know about you, but for me, like, I don't always know.
Yes.
Like, I gotta be a person that, like, I'm a person that, like, that often requires a little bit of time to figure out what the heck it is I need,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? And or like what I'm feeling in a given day. Like,
Yeah.
if something's going on, like, I like need a day to like think about exactly how I'm feeling about a particular situation.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can circle back and be like, okay, I feel X way.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why.
Yeah. But it takes time. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
For me,
totally,
it takes time.
yeah,
Yes.
I think it totally takes time. And I think it's, for me, one of my feelings I hate the most is confusion. So being willing to be confused for a while
Yeah.
before you understand, is a muscle that I've had to build.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like it's the next frontier of our human evolution, honestly, is like coming to be more aware of our feelings, our needs, and 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 for this reason, which you've articulated, that when we know what our boundaries are,
Mm-hmm.
we kind of need to know
Yeah.
that if
Yeah.
we're going to enter into conversation with other people.
Yeah. And then you need to communicate it with other people,
Oh yeah,
right?
how's it going with that?
um, I'm a human. I screw it up
Yeah.
a lot.
Yeah.
And every time I screw it up, I learn something about how I screw it up, and I can use that to not screw it up that way. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I forget who it was. Somebody said, like, try again, fail better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like that's the human condition in a
Yeah.
lot of ways,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's the condition of when it comes to being in relationship with other people.
Mm-hmm.
You try again, you fail again,
Mm-hmm.
you go back, you think about, you reflect on your experience, you name where you screwed up,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can engage in a process of reconciliation and repentance and repair.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, for me, what has helped, more practically speaking, is that, like, generally speaking, people are not trying to piss you off. People are not trying to make your life harder.
Mm-hmm.
People are not actively trying to destroy you.
Mm-hmm.
People, as hard as you are trying to reach out to other people in love,
Mm-hmm.
they're trying to do the same thing with you.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the wires get crossed,
Mm-hmm.
and it ends up hurting.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't shut yourself off from that experience, but you can use that experience as a springboard to have new and better experiences,
Yeah.
right?
That was a very profound statement, Dorie, that people are not trying to piss us off, that they're trying to reach out in love as well. And I'm holding what you said and thinking about all the humans on this planet right now.
Yeah.
I on some like deep theological level, I do believe everyone is motivated by love, that sometimes because of their formation that love is expressed in deeply selfish ways and in deeply harmful ways, but that on some level they are trying to get their needs met and it's a little perverted.
People aren't doing things because they think they're wrong. People are doing things because they believe they are the right things to be doing. Yeah. And they may be, and people, I do believe generally people are doing things because because they truly believe that this is the best possible solution.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's not, and I mean, we need to be able to recognize that if we're going to make any kind of progress in actually connecting with people and,
Yeah.
you know, stopping
Mhm.
harm from happening.
Right.
And, I mean, and I think that being rooted in love, talking about being rooted in love is such an easy thing to say, and it is such a hard thing to do,
Yeah.
because love as a concept, you know, the way that we experience it, it's not perfect.
Mhm.
You know, I'm a big believer in the only perfect love comes from God, right?
Mhm.
You know, we, it's going to get messed up, and it's going to get um reflected and twisted in ways that do not align with what God wants for us, which is abundant life, flourishing, um,
Mhm.
care for all of us in community with one another, right?
Right.
And yet, like, all of the experiences that we have
Mhm.
on an individual level, and then multiply that times the 8 billion people on this planet,
Mm.
you know, stuff is going to get lost in translation.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the question that's emerging as you talk is, especially this idea that I totally agree with you, to hold the idea that they are trying to do what they think is right. They're not out to ruin Dory's life.
No.
Um, and I do think when I shift my perspective and when I hold that to be true, I can hear people and not, it's like that taking it personally part that can become a little softened if you have that perspective.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think part of the challenges of the world right now is we know everybody's opinions, we know everybody's ideas about things, but we don't actually know all of these other humans on the planet. We don't sit and talk with them. We don't
Yeah.
break bread with them, and so there's
Yeah.
a way in which our ideas are like in conversation, but our bodies are not, our beingness is not. And to me, that feels like part of the
Yeah.
problem. And it's making me think, can you have that perspective with everybody? Like who are we called to breach the gap with? Like, is it just the people who we meet on the street and who we, and where does your boundary setting kind of come in when you decide to engage with someone? Because it does feel like you have to have at least good faith. This has come up in some of the podcasts lately. Like, being honest with people is really hard.
Yes, it
and that,
is.
and so and what I'm experiencing so far is that it works when there's a real foundation of love. When it's like when that's there, then there's room for the honesty. But if there's no foundation of love between two people, and you're just sharing your thoughts or feelings, that it tends to it doesn't tend to work in my experience. um
Yes.
so
Yeah.
I don't know, how do you choose what community or what people to do this hard work of bridging the gap? Is it just the people who show up in your life? And
Yeah. Okay. So this is an excellent question, and I have a lot of different thoughts
okay,
going in a bunch of different directions. So bear with me, and I
we'll see
might
where
need
it
you
goes.
to restate the question to make sure I answer it at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so what you're saying about, like, knowing other people brings to mind, like, this whole thing that we are now experiencing with parasocial relationships versus
Mm-hmm.
social relationships,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
wherein we are exposed to so much information that people share.
Mm-hmm.
But that is not the totality of a human person. That is not the totality of a human life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because what we choose to share on, whether it's like in these more public spheres,
Mm-hmm.
there's a level of self-censoring that happens. Like, you don't share everything about your life. I don't share everything about my life.
Mm-hmm.
There and we share things in particular ways for particular purposes,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so even though there are these there are these people that seem to have quite a bit of power and influence and celebrity and all that great stuff, and we, they post and they tweet and they do all the stuff. They it's not we don't actually know them.
Yeah.
We don't.
Yeah.
And we need to get clear on that.
Mm-hmm.
Because we don't even fully know the people that are directly in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
We don't even fully know ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So and there have been so many things that have happened, particularly within the past 5 years, that have really called into question our relationship to these to these ideas of people that we have.
Right. Yeah.
Like,
Can we be in true relationship as a virtual head? This is a big live question to me, especially as I seek to create a virtual ministry.
Yeah, and
yeah.
I think and I think that's a live question for everybody now, because it's so new and we're still figuring it out, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that it's certainly possible, but we need to get clear on what relationships with people look like in general before we begin projecting all of our stuff onto these more public personas that we have, right?
Yeah.
If there's some scandal that a celebrity has or whatever, you can have the feelings that you have.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, the reporters will dig up whatever stuff they have on a given story about it and everything. And yeah, we may know some of the facts, but we don't actually know everything. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So we need to really cultivate that humility within ourselves that recognizes that we're just, we really don't know the overwhelming majority of what is going on in the world.
Well, and I love the way you share that that's true in live relationships and it's true in virtual relationships. And I think that's important because I do think everything that exists has a positive and a negative. And that some of what's happened with our abilities to connect online has been incredibly beautiful because people have been actually able to be more authentic in this forum in a way that maybe they couldn't be authentic in their family of origin or their community. So some really deep connections are made possible. And I think, I don't know, but one of my suspicions about this moment is that for a lot of us, we are isolated, and being able to connect to people's stories on our smartphone is one of the things that's sustaining us, being able to do that. And but I think for me, it's well, what's the next step? As we've become more vulnerable or more real or authentic online, how do we then bring that authenticity into the real world, into the physical world? And I think it asks questions on both sides. How do our in-person communities become spaces that foster more authenticity? And then how do our virtual communities foster more real connections? It's a big question.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And, we're all figuring it out together, right?
Yeah.
I think that the potential and indeed the results that have come from creating virtual communities is definitely more positive than negative.
In your sense,
and I think that there's all no community, no place is ever going to be perfect, right? And I think we need to be clear about that and to recognize it for what it is. A virtual community is a community, and we need to hold it as such, but it is distinct from an in-person community.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
I can't believe I'm saying this as a super introvert, but like, you do need both.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
you do need both. You do need other people.
Yes.
Like, I joke that Simon and Garfunkel wrote I Am a Rock about me, but like,
Yeah.
no, like, I do need other people. Like,
Yes.
I cannot be entirely self-sufficient on my own. Like, that's,
Yeah.
and anybody who says otherwise, just
Yeah.
is sorely mistaken. Like,
I
just,
think a lot of us are waking
yeah.
up to that reality. And I think that's partly where my work is grounded is I know I need other people. I know I'm not a square puzzle piece, and there's a
Yeah.
lot of communities I'm not going to fit in, and I'm not kind of willing to. My sense is that previous generations were sort of maybe they wanted the community and they were a little bit more willing to conform to a certain way of being to be able to be a part of that community. And
Yeah.
that part of this moment is we've all gotten really different and that's really beautiful and cool, but now it's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, now that we've figured out who we are and what our boundaries are, like, can we figure out a way to fit together? Can we come back in person? And i do I do have some hope that we can do that when we are grounded in love and when we're grounded in like our basic needs. So I really like that you named, you're coming to your needs. I love to just be together and like eat food, like be together and you
Yeah.
know do some of that basic care work that we need as humans. And we'll see. I don't know. I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't know exactly how to make that happen because so many of the social spaces of connection that have existed thus far have been either particular religions and their practices, or they're like economic spaces, like to
Yeah.
go and spend money to have some kind of
Mm-hmm.
entertainment experience, or so I'm just so interested in like what other kinds of spaces we can start to create together to be in community, and in ways that's in ways that isn't extractive, but like
Yeah.
creative.
Yeah.
um
And I mean, I think it's important. Okay, so there's a couple things here.
sure.
Um, like, yes, always down for food and being together. Yes,
Yeah.
always.
Uh-huh.
And um, for me, it's also like, ensuring that my basic needs are met before I go into a conversation that might be difficult or an interaction that might be difficult,
Mm-hmm.
um, helps me ensure a better outcome.
Yeah. Yeah.
At least from my behavior, because
Mm-hmm.
I can only control myself. Like, I can't control other people.
Yeah.
Nobody can control anybody else,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so for me, it's been really important to be like, oh, I feel dehydrated. Let me grab my water bottle.
Mm-hmm.
Or, oh, I haven't eaten since this morning. Let's, let's grab a snack before we do this.
Yeah.
Or like, if you can't do that, name that to the other person. Like, hey, I'm super stressed out. I've had a really long day. I've had to be super social today, and
Mm-hmm.
I also could probably use some caffeine.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm naming that as we're going into this tough conversation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that
Yes.
that so there's that piece of it, right?
Yeah.
And when it comes to actually like fostering like real community, like, I think it doesn't, I mean, it doesn't have to be all that difficult. Like,
Mhm.
I think about like how I became the mysterious question asker in
Yes.
some ways, right?
Uh-huh.
Like, one of the, like, I'd been receiving your Substack, and I was reading it, and like, we're friends before, right? But
Mhm.
like, we weren't like, I don't know that we weren't as close as we are now. And
Yeah.
I would, what I would do on Sundays is like, I get home from working at church, I make myself a cup of tea, and I sit down and I read your Substack. That is
Yeah.
what I do for myself, and it's lovely.
Mhm.
And this wasn't I don't know that this was the first question I asked, and I asked this in the actual Substack
Mhm.
space
Platform. Yeah.
platform, yeah, about like, explain to me about what you mean by usefulness,
Mm-hmm.
because I wasn't getting it, and
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to understand, because like, I didn't, because like, it seems so great, and you're awesome, and I was totally down with being loved, totally down with being honest, but what exactly do you mean by usefulness, particularly in this space, in this late stage American capitalist political moment of chaos?
Yeah.
And
Important to define.
yeah, and you very graciously wrote this whole response to it, and it was really lovely. And it was great, and I was super happy about it, and it was wonderful. And then, like, when I had another question, I just straight up texted you, and I was just like, "Can you help me understand this?" And and like that just grew into me asking many, many, many questions and follow-up questions and follow-up thoughts and all sorts of things. And now, like, you and I have a really lovely friendship because of this. We are more connected because of this. We have a little like community of two people, which is called a friendship. And it doesn't need to be super complicated. And I think what I'm hearing from you is that, you have this curiosity about what it looks like, and that seems to me like to be a really good impulse.
Well, I was going to say, and it was your curiosity to ask the question of me. And I do feel like that is a big piece of what creates community, is the asking and the giving and the receiving, the exchange. And when I think of square peg community that we don't want to be, it's like there in some ways, like, don't ask a question, that this is how we do it, and there's no room for questions. And it does feel like thriving community is when there's a giving and a receiving and a and being willing. I've definitely, in my own journey, I think I've been more effective at doing more good the more help I've asked for. And that's been a really big one to like in my head, because it's so antithetical to how I've been raised. Every time I've asked for help, it's actually made room for something to come in and grow. And when I'm just giving or saying I know and I give, there's just something that it cuts off the flow. So creating communities that nurture the freedom to ask questions and to ask for help, I think does feel pretty essential.
And like, I will say, like, I still very much struggle with asking for help. That is a thing that I am still learning, still growing into. I think I've gotten a little better at it ish, kinda. And part of that is just my inner hyper independent streak. Part of that is, being raised in this particular socio-historical moment where individuality has been so emphasized. And self-sufficiency is being being held as such a huge value. And like, if you actually interrogate that to its natural endpoint, you realize it doesn't exist.
It's not
right?
Pretty. It's not real.
This is not. It's not real. It doesn't exist. It doesn't. It never has. Like, people always need other people in order to survive, let alone thrive. And the more we name that and own that for what it is, the more that we're able to navigate this world in ways that don't make us insane. Right?
Totally.
And, there's also a value, though. I think there is a value, though, in learning to do what you can for yourself, right? That doesn't mean like becoming this. That doesn't mean being the rock. That doesn't mean being the rock or the island. It means, showing up and doing your part,
right,
and bringing your best self.
And finding that balance. And it does feel like Right. Again, everything is positive or negative. So it's not that
Mhm.
having
Or
individualism is
neutral.
totally a negative, but
Right.
it was a it's a value that's been growing and maybe gone a little overboard.
Yeah.
And now it feels like it's time for the pendulum to swing back a bit into real, and one of the things that comes up for me when you name that is like, yes, we totally depend on other people, and in many ways capitalism and the exchange of
Mhm.
money kind of makes us not notice that. So because it's always like, well, no, I have all the money and so I'm getting what I need by paying these other people.
Yes, and I think about the supply chain breakdown during the pandemic, remember?
Yeah. Yes.
When the grocery stores were all bare and everything like that. Like, you know,
We're
it
starting to
we're
see.
starting to realize like, oh my gosh, like we really do depend on all of these systems functioning in a particular way to ensure that, to ensure that our needs are met.
Yeah.
And the fact that like just a couple things happened and these systems completely
Mhm.
shattered for a bit and it's still recovering,
Mm.
in a lot of ways. It's it shows just how fragile and precarious we are.
Yeah.
That how how fragile and precarious this life as we've designed it
Right.
is,
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think people are starting to realize that and perhaps think differently about how to how to make it better.
Right. Well, and it's making me think of your being a community rooted in fear or rooted in love, is I think as we become aware of that precariousness, our bodies get freaked out and afraid.
Mhm. Yeah.
And what does it take for us to recognize that fragility and stay grounded in love, which I feel like is what will get us through any precarious, meltdown. And for me, it's one of the reasons why I feel really called to build more real community, like to imagine some new possibilities. How
Mhm.
can we eat, and what are our real needs, so that we can like focus on those real primary basic needs and
Mhm.
how they could be more shored up in a crisis.
Yeah.
um,
And how do we create the space necessary to even begin to interrogate that? Because it is a privilege that
mm,
we are able to sit down and think about what are my actual needs here,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know?
yeah.
Because not everybody gets to do that.
Yes, well, exactly. And how can we take this moment to do that work? Because if the world becomes more chaotic and we're just trying to survive, we're gonna be stripped down to that. So it does feel like a how do we use this moment in freedom,
Yeah.
while we have it? And maybe in using the freedom we have now, we might be able to hold on to it if we can own our needs more clearly and reach out. Uh, it's quite a moment to be alive, Dorie. I'm glad to be alive with you.
I'm glad to be alive with you too, Sage.
I feel like we could go on for another hour easily.
Absolutely.
And
This
I
was
know both
fun.
of us have busy schedules. So maybe we'll call it here. Unless do you have a closing thought or anything you want to leave?
Do I have a closing? I mean,
No
I have
pressure.
like 87 closing thoughts. I always have 87 closing thoughts.
Yeah,
Like I while I'm speaking, like people get 1/8 of what's going on inside my
I
head.
believe
So
that to be
like,
true.
yeah. Um but I guess what I'll say is like, I mean, I don't really have anything to like wrap it up all neatly with a bow, and that's probably a good thing because the bow doesn't exist.
The bow does not exist.
The bow does not exist.
This
We're
is just
just
the
yeah.
continuation of an ongoing conversation that is happening in many places, and I'm glad it's happening between us, and I hope it will open up many other possibilities. I guess my closing thought I want to share that came up as you were talking about individualism and community is, I think like this Helen Keller event that's coming up, and thinking about her, I think really highlights that question, because members of the disability community kind of are critical of Helen sometimes, because she's like,
yeah,
she, had this spirit of overcoming, and yet I don't think she ever, but she also had a real awareness of her privilege and of the resources that were made available to her and that they weren't made available to all other people. And she wanted to create systemic change so that other people would have those resources. And so she's a very useful figure, I think, to hold these questions of what it means to own our power, to not give it away, not say that we have nothing to bring because of certain limitations that we face, while also working to overcome those limitations and to create space change on the ground for those who need it. So
this is inspiring so many thoughts with my bioethics disability hat on.
Yes.
So, but I will refrain from sharing them now.
Let's make our next conversation the topic of bioethics hat. I would love to put that hat on.
Oh, I would be more than happy to do that.
Like a very important part of this work.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah. For people who don't know me, I'm a scholar of comparative studies in bioethics, and I'm working on a PhD in that in Boston College. So yeah.
Well, and that's one of the limbs of the Helen Keller Collaborative that we are holding, is the hope that it can be a space to foster more conversation about bioethics. Rosemary Garland Thompson, who's one of our supporters, that's her.
Yeah, that's her thing.
Her thing is, we have to have broad public conversations about these technologies and their implications, and that includes everybody's voice, not just academics, not just people in the medical world, but all the people,
even weirdo priests like me,
even weirdo priests like you, Dorie. Thank you for being the weirdo priest that you are. You make you make the mosaic of this planet more beautiful, and
as do you.
We'll talk again.
Yay!
All right, have a great day.
Thank you. You too,
friend.
And I love it when we both are in the